Hello world, and welcome back to, or welcome to, the Pop Culture Patter podcast. As always, I'm your host, Callum Brown, and this week's guest is Scottish stand-up comic, actor and writer, Chris Forbes. Chris and I take a trip through his career so far, from stand-up comedian to starring in Scot Squad, co-writing BBC's The Farm, and his work with Judy Murray as the infamous third Murray brother, Duncan Murray. As always, this podcast was recorded with my good friends at the Podcast Studio Glasgow, the East End of Glasgow's digital creative hub, and the only podcast studio in Scotland that offers 18 years of experience in the medium and is ran by a pioneer in British podcasting. For more information regarding the wide range of services offered, or to book a session, please visit www.podcaststudioglasgow.com. And before we get into this episode, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Brown & Co Properties, an award-winning family-run estate agency based in Whitburn, West Lothian. With a Property Mark protected service for a fixed fee, we are your go-to agent for expert property sales advice in the area. Get on the go with Brown & Co.
Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And how are you?
Not too bad yourself?
I'm not too shabby, thank you. You've been on a few podcasts, but...
None like this.
Oh.
This is the best one so far.
And I didn't pay you to say that.
Yeah.
Do you listen to any podcasts?
I do here and there. They're great for driving. Certainly during... We had a lockdown baby. And ever since then, we've been listening to a lot of the kind of parenting podcasts.
Right.
Just the ones that are honest and like share parenting hell podcast type things. So,
yeah.
But yeah, there's so many. So I do quite like. I'm stereotypical in the sense that I quite like a true crime thing as well for driving, you know. But yeah.
Any podcast in particular that names that if anybody listens, like I want to check that out actually.
Well, I think I just said that quite vaguely, trying to mean all parenting podcasts, but I believe that one actually is Parenting Hell podcast. I've just started listening to one about the girl in the blue Cadillac, a kind of mystery death, kind of real life story in America. So that's been quite interesting.
Nice. Yeah. And you are a new parent through lockdown, so
pretty new, yeah. She's just, her daughter's 21 months, so it's all go. It's all go.
A bit of a learning curve then.
Yeah, aye. So if I start to kind of drift off, it's not you. It's just lack of sleep from the sleep thief.
Do you have any pop culture interests out with what you do?
Oh, I'm a pop culture person, really. You know, nice. I'm right into my music and sport, and I mean, fashion-wise as well. I'm not. You could probably tell from this not very fashionable big wheelie jumper, but I love my trainers. Bizarrely, right into my shoes.
So sneakers.
It's my only vice, really. I think because I'm bizarrely a huge basketball fan, I was right into Jordan, and so I love my Jordans, and I've got a kind of horrible collection of shoes, including some I just don't wear, much to my wife's despair.
And what sort of music, you're saying you're a music fan, what's your kind of go-to?
Well, I've got an eclectic mix. I grew up with very odd tastes as well. My family are from the northwest coast, so I'm right into kind of trad and kind of traditional and ceilidh music as well. I play the accordion. So a mixture of kind of old school kind of folk music and Scottish music, but then mixed in with the most bizarre range of like country western and the Drifters. Okay, these were the kind of music I was brought up on. I've ended up still loving. Yeah. So I love kind of 60s and kind of Motown and stuff like this. Brilliant. And then I guess the 90s being then the formative teenage years, I'm still like kind of Britpop child as well. So yeah. Like all the indie rock.
Brilliant. That's amazing. I didn't know that. It's good that you dropped in the Drifters there.
Oh, mate.
What a band.
Honestly, I get such a lot of flack for that as well. And in fact, I worked in our wee village I grew up in as well. There's one wee shop. My brother had worked in it. My sister worked in it. I worked in it. But when I was there for about 4 years. And one year I got to organise the annual Christmas party. And I was like, don't worry, I'll make sure we book somewhere really cool. And people thought we're going to a restaurant or out karaoke. But I booked a really random hotel in the village next to us that was having a Drifters tribute night. And I was just the only one up singing all the songs, loving it. Great, best Christmas ever.
You mentioned growing up in a small town. When I was doing my digging on you, you're claimed to be from Stirling, but you're actually from a town called Pillue.
Yeah,
right?
well, I was born in Stirling, so that was about as close as I got to living there, but I was born there. We did live in Cullen and Menstrie, that were kind of around that area. But yeah, my mum is from a wee place, Pillue, where my gran still is, and my dad was from Gairloch, so the Wester Ross. So a lot of our family and extended family are still in the Highlands, Inverness, Invergordon, places like that. Yeah. But we moved down pretty early on, so I'm more... The wee village I mostly grew up in is Bridge o' Weir, in Renfrewshire.
Which is a lovely wee place.
No, very quaint, very countryside rural, and it was good.
It's nice. My friend, obviously, how we met, has a gym there, and he lives there. I think he lives a 2-minute walk from his actual gym, so he's got it made.
You know,
but
we'd all go to the gym if we lived 2 minutes from it.
But that's how we were introduced together. You went into Jamie's gym. Jamie was like, my mate's got a podcast, you are an actor, as a comedian, why don't you go on his podcast?
He set us up. He's like Cupid of the podcasting world.
Yep. He's the most over person on this podcast. We can't stop talking about him. So you mentioned sport as well. You're obviously a big football fan from what I can see.
Yeah.
Are you an Aberdeen fan? Did I read that right?
For my sins, yeah. Yep. Well, I say that, but we're on a terrific run right now. So Aberdeen are flying. We wouldn't have been saying that a couple of months ago. And, Goodwin's kind of doomed last days. But an Aberdeen fan, I don't know why. I guess the kind of Highlands connection, and being born in '83, they won the Cup Winners' Cup that year. So I think my uncle, who was the biggest kind of footballer and influence on us, had been over at the final, and I think maybe I was like a lucky charm or something. So that was the strips I got when I was young.
You stuck with them.
But I'm not a diehard fan. I don't really get to a lot of the games anymore. If anything, I'm a massive Scotland fan more.
Yeah.
So I'm more passionate about the Scotland national team. Yeah,
and I saw that, and it was funny because when Jamie had messaged me to say, I've just had a guy in a gym, you should connect. I saw you on the telly at the Spain game.
Oh, really?
And I was like, this is weird. I'm like, this is so funny that we were going to try and do this, but you had a wee bit to do in the Spain game,
well,
didn't you?
I like to think I was responsible for those 2 brilliant back-to-back results, including the Spain one, because I was just doing a little bit for, they do a wee thing, Scotland HQ, on the day of home games.
Yeah.
I did get to speak to a few of the squad members, and I think those words have really rung true and steered us to glory. So now I'm really demanding that they bring me back in just so I get to hang out with the players.
I think we're all doing that as well because, those 2 victories were just not seen at all, were they?
No, the Spain game was incredible. I've been to a lot of games, but I think what really stood out in terms of atmosphere-wise was because it was a midweek game as well. It was probably the soberest the whole stadium's been, but it was one of the best atmospheres ever. So that's saying something.
I think you'd posted a picture of the decibels of
warning level for the hearing. It was absolutely mind-boggling.
And that was probably it wasn't that Scotland played well, but Spain were so poor.
Yeah,
it's the worst Spain squad I've ever seen.
I couldn't believe how desperately they were performing from so early on. When teams start kind of flopping around and acting that way, it was the fact that it was Spain. You're going, why are they doing this? This is pathetic from these world champions. So I think we just had them rattled early, and they panicked. I don't know, I think they thought it was going to be easy. And because you've been to a lot of the Scotland games, would you say that was the best atmosphere, or have you got something that's topped that? It was certainly up there. I think when McTominay scored the 3-2 winner, I think the Israel game, it was pretty big in terms of the circumstances for it. But in terms of, I think maybe just because of the situation and the surroundings, I was at the 1-0 Scotland-France game in Paris where McFadden scored the wonder goal. Really? And I think in terms of just atmosphere of a whole day, I mean, we did the whole march from, it was like 10,000 fans marching from the Eiffel Tower to the stadium, and we were actually sat in one of the one of the French sides. They'd opened up more areas for Scotland because there were so many fans going over. So when that goal went in, it was just it was unreal. It's kind of blackout moments. You only remember wee bits.
Yeah.
But I do remember that game in particular as well. Me and my brother have been at a lot of games and a lot of away games. We were talking on our trip over there about, isn't it mad that some people end up taking their tops off? Like that's one thing I've never understood. It's like, why do you feel the need to just get topless? Like, what makes you feel that good? But of course, the minute that goal went in, I looked round, my brother had his top off, swinging around. It was just, in terms of a full-on day of an atmosphere and experience, I don't think anything will ever top that day.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's one of those things that you can remember where you were. Obviously, you were at it, but I can remember exactly where I was at that time. But what's been the best game you've seen at Hampden?
The best game... Do you know, I mean, some of those ones that have just been are up there, but bizarrely, the campaign when it was still McLeish in his first stint, when bizarrely Alan Hutton had turned into this kind of amazing marauding right back, and we had a couple of great games. I'm trying to think if one of them might have been... I don't know, do you know, in terms of actually watching us playing well, it would have to be more recently. Because we've had kind of good results, but I would say one of the last two games is maybe one of the best I've seen us playing. It's a tricky one.
I know it's a really odd squad, isn't it? Like there's so much quality there, but it's like we've got all the quality in the same position. So your midfield, you've got like McGinn, McTominay, McGregor, Jack, you've got all these guys that Gilmore, there's loads of people that are not even getting a game, but we don't have a lot of centre backs, we don't have a lot of goalkeepers, and we don't have a lot of strikers, but everywhere else we're sorted.
Yeah, it's mad. But then at least Dykes is almost this kind of cult hero now as well, that he does just seem to win everything in the air, and he's one of these people that tries really hard, but at least he also does kind of chip in.
Yeah,
I think we had almost like a decade of Kenny Miller, who, God bless him, would run his socks off, and that was kind of his defining feature. Like, he always works hard, but maybe didn't always get his just rewards. But Dykes just kind of works hard and scores a few goals.
Yeah, and it's quite a cool dynamic him and Che Adams had. But it was kind of like he was winning the balls, putting it down to Che Adams, and they just don't seem to play together anymore. Like it's either one or the other. Have you got a favourite Scotland player ever?
Well, do you know, for I guess kind of cult reasons as well, I loved it when Christian Daly played. It's certain players just end up becoming cult heroes for whatever reasons, and I guess it was during quite lean years, really. But when we used to sing the Christian Daly song, which was number 1 is Christian Daly, number 2 is Christian Daly, number 3 is Christian Daly, and it would go all the way through. And the manager is Christian Daly, and the physio is Christian. Everyone just loved him. He had great hair and he tried hard. So people like that, I loved that kind of era when we were just this kind of more of a stodgy team. There was something, Colin Hendry and Braveheart and all this. John McGinn's my current favourite player, I think, would be the same as a lot of people.
Yeah.
Seeing someone that can use his arse so skillfully in a game of football is very Scottish.
That's exactly my dad's point. He's like, I don't get it with McGinn. He just fucking uses his arse for everything. And I'm like, but that's what's good. He ends up winning so many tackles. And he gets stuck in. I had the Christian Daly one that sticks out to me is the Bertie Votes when he's like, fucking shite bags, and he's like, Christian. I think Jonathan Watson did it on the online excuse. Right, it was so good. So you actually started into sport from basketball, was that right? And you actually went over to America and played basketball, but before that you were in the St Mirren, was it the Buddies?
Yeah, so we were, like most Scottish kids, I loved football and wanted to be a football player, but wasn't that great really, but so when basketball came along, I just seemed to have a bit more of a natural aptitude for it, but I was also tall, so that kind of stood out in Scotland. And so we came through the school system and they set up kind of more local teams in Paisley and Renfrewshire teams, and so I was one of the first members. There was 12 of us that set up the very first St Mirren basketball team. I think it was like an under 16s team or under 14s it might have started, which was great. A senior team then came along not too long afterwards, and after I did go away to America, came back and played for St Mirren. They had two different teams, a St Mirren kind of National League team and a St Mirren Reid Keller Buries team as well. So I played for a few different teams in my time, but that was my main team.
Because you were the OG.
Yeah, I like to think.
Well, you played for Scotland as well, under 16s apparently.
Yeah, so that was kind of, at the time, it felt like it was a big deal. Certainly, I got called up to the under 16s when I was 14, so a lot of pressure, but it was a great experience.
And then how did that come about that you went to America then?
Again, thankful to my coaches at the time, in terms of my high school and St Mirren coach, Coach Lang, or Mr Lang, who was also our teacher. He had known about a programme because his son, who had been a good basketball player as well, had done the same thing. So he was able to kind of set us up with the company and all the forms we had to fill in, and kind of the hard sell to my mum and say, like, I think he should go, he could do well. And so of course you're thinking, wow, I'll just go over there and
be an NBA.
That's it, straight away, get signed up. But I mean, basketball aside, it was an incredible experience, and it certainly improved my basketball, but it was an eye-opener as well. It was, you can be good over here, and then even high school level, it was like, wow, there's so many players that are much better. Yeah,
and you were yourself? Did you live yourself over there? Or
no, part of the deal was you have to go and live with a host family, so they get a family to take people in. So that was terrifying, but quite exciting. But I was 16 when I went over, so it was quite a... I would have had to live with someone, I think, and the family that took me in essentially it was like the real life Flanders family from The Simpsons. I thought I was going to live with this really cool, like a family from the OC, and I'd be like living with Sandy, the cool dad, and like funny brother and all that. But yeah, they were pretty full on, quite heavy religious, and we didn't always see eye to eye. So
it could be quite difficult.
Yeah, bit of a culture clash.
Yeah, and you quickly came back. But you then went on to do, you studied sports science and physiology, is that right?
Yeah, so I think at the time I was still obsessed with sport and trying to stay within sport. I just thought that was going to be my life, and I thought, well, maybe physiotherapy would be a thing, or sports coaching. And so, I went to Glasgow Uni to do sports science physiology, which was a minefield for me. I mean, I was still in America when I was filling in my UCAS forms and stuff.
Right.
And of course, if I was still in high school over here, your requirement would be you need so many hires, or you need your chemistry and physics. But it's a totally different system in America. So the school guide the universities over here said you have to do your SAT in America and just get a 1400 or whatever it was. But that was purely English and maths. For your SAT over there. So I did get the mark I needed to get into that course over here, but I had never even done chemistry or physics or biology at a higher level, in fifth year before I left. So all of a sudden I just went straight to uni to do university grade chemistry and physics, and it was I still get pelters off my mates that I was in a course with because I got sorry, I'm not tripping out. I just saw something floating. I think I'm probably the only person in history that got a G. We didn't even know it was possible.
Right.
In one of my chemistry exams at uni, I got a G. I basically looked at the paper, and after 10 minutes, I was like, I need to leave. And I got a G.
Oof.
So I thought F was like the lowest you could get, but you can get a G. So I think it meant G was like go home.
Somewhere there's a plaque being like, this guy got a G.
I'm telling you, it's quite incredible. But yeah, I was in way over my head, so I swapped courses. But even halfway through that, I was thinking, it probably, I didn't know if this was what I was wanting to be doing, and I'd had this wee niggling thing about I had wanted to try, acting or performance or stand up. So.
Yeah. And you got into acting first from going to college or uni? Did you?
Yeah,
it was college, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, technically, again, that year in America, I had done a kind of talk in front of the school that was about the differences between Scotland and America. But it was really just kind of filled with funny stories and stuff. And in my head afterwards, I was like, that was kind of like stand-up. I didn't really realise it at the time, but that was always in the back of my head after that.
Yeah.
Even though I'd gone over to play basketball, I was like, wow, that 10 minutes of just making everyone laugh. It was incredible. And
you got a buzz.
Aye. And so I never really knew how to get into stand-up, so I just thought the most natural thing was to apply to these acting and performance courses. So after Glasgow Uni, I went to Langside College which was great. That was probably the most enjoyable 3 years I had. Met lots of great people. Again, totally new world to me. There was a lot of kind of drama school kids that had come up through youth groups, and I did kind of think, what the fuck have I done here? And does anyone like football? And kind of, but no, it was great. And probably I was probably full of, inhibitions and stuff like that. And just the fact, again, something I loved about America was it is very cheesy, but that's really good. People aren't ashamed to kind of be in band or act or play instruments. Over here, we're all like, don't do anything different, and who do you support? And so then to go to college and see that people were actually being quite expressive, a creative output. And so it was kind of halfway through my time at Langside, I was like, I started to find out about comedy clubs and I could apply for things. So that gave me the confidence to try stand up.
Yeah. And where did you go for your first gig? Was it the Stand that everybody does? Or?
No, well, again, annoyingly, I'd never even knew the Stand existed at that time, but I'd seen an advertisement in the paper for it's a really famous competition called So You Think You're Funny. And so I just applied for that, and there was a heat you had to do, and it was in the Merchant City in Glasgow. And that was it, really. Honestly, the first... I think if you do, I think everyone should try it, as well, stand up. People always say it'd be quite trippy to try. But very quickly, I think, like the minute I did it, I thought, I really want to do this again. And there's other people that try it and go, never again. But off the back of that, again, just meeting other comics and going, look, there's a whole world. And I literally just went up to the guy that was running it and said, look, I've really enjoyed that, but what do you do now? Like, how do you be a stand-up? Where do you go? I didn't know that there was a scene or a circuit. And he said, well, you can apply for this. And then another comic was like, have you heard of the Stand? You should email this person. And it just starts to snowball and you meet people. And
wow,
great.
And what do you remember about your first gig?
I remember it being and it still is to a degree, but it's the most natural laxative you can ever imagine. If you've got constipation problems, sign up for a gig, because that kind of half hour to an hour beforehand, it's just you're thinking, why am I doing this? What am I doing?
Yeah.
That day as well in the paper, Eddie Izzard had done an interview in I think it was the Daily Record, and he was talking about being a comic and how different it is. And I just couldn't believe it was this day. He was like, there's a big difference between being funny with your mates in the pub and being a stand-up comedian. I was going, oh no, that's kind of why I thought I'd be funny, because I've always been like the funny guy in the pub.
Yeah.
But so very nerve-wracking, and I just remember it. I also really remember thinking how different everyone was. I don't know why, I just expected everyone was going to go up and do like these routines, but realising that there was just one-liners and absurdists and observations, and it was great. It was just this funny little box room as well, and just thinking, this is such a funny little underground world that exists. And
do you remember your opening line?
My opening line, what would it have been? I do remember the two main routines I had. Bird flu was huge at the time.
Right.
So I had this huge, big, long, kind of quite surreal routine about the chickens taking over the farm with bird flu. And it sounds terrible now, but it actually went down quite well, and how they were squaring up to the other animals, pretending to sneeze on them and that. And like the horses had always thought they were the best and all this, and the chickens were taking over, and the cows, they teamed up with the cows because no one had forgiven them for their kind of for all their foot and mouth and cow disease. And so then I had chickens riding on the backs of cows, and it sounds ridiculous now. It sounds ridiculous.
But you were saying on another podcast that I was watching that you prefer telling stories rather than like jokes or one-liners and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is it quite natural to you to just have a set and be like, this is my story? Or do you keep a story from the start and work all the way through, or do you just kind of tell stories?
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's what I prefer. I think it's just, again, very early on, you kind of realise if you're a kind of joke comic or a story comic. And I always say I wish I had more gags, and you speak to gag comics and they're like, I wish I could tell more stories, and the Holy Grail would be a nice mix of the two. But I guess like a lot of Scottish people as well, you idolise people like Billy Connolly, and I probably grew up more listening to storytellers and observational comics, so that just seemed like the natural way for me to go. And it leaves more leeway. Again, my memory's not as good as sometimes you watch these one-liners and Jimmy Carr, Milton Jones, Gary Delaney, and even the memory. You need to.
Yeah.
People doing an hour and a half of one-liners. It's incredible.
And at the start, you're probably doing 5 minutes at a time, aren't you? But for those 5 minutes, you need to be absolutely spot on with everything that you say.
Yeah. So
really difficult job. Actually, when you think about it,
it's mad to think starting out how difficult it is, and every comic has their sets written on their hand, and you can see it sweating, it's smudging away, and you're desperately trying to remember. People have different techniques on the inside, and some people have it on their mic hand written like this, so they don't have to look too much. And I know one comic that would write on the inside of each of their fingers, so it didn't look too obvious.
Oh, okay.
There's all sorts of mad things going on to get that 5 minutes. And it seems mad looking back, because once you've got your kind of what you're comfortable, your kind of pro 20 or 25 as people call a wee pro, like club 20, you almost don't think about it as much. You've kind of got your set thing and you can play off of it and come back. But starting out, it's pretty terrifying as you're trying to build up your set.
Yeah, and you feel you have to fail as part of being a comic, that you have to do that. Yeah,
I always say like you should never trust a comic that you've never seen die. Like everyone needs to die, or they're not trying, because you need to try mad stuff.
Yeah, you
need to try and push it a wee bit. Or is this funny? And anyone that plays it too safe, I just think, you're not doing the game properly here.
Yeah.
You need to die brutally, because it forces you to be better as well.
That's very true. Yeah, and improvisation, is that something that you enjoy doing as well? Like, do you get a feel for the audience and you're kind of like, I'm going to go with this one tonight?
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoy it. And I think, again, when you're starting out, all comics are the same. Comparing or emceeing a gig always seems like a bit more terrifying. And all MCs are folk that have been going a bit longer, who've got a bit more experience. And now I love it. And I think most people that compare gigs enjoy it because you probably are a bit sick of certain bits of your material. If you're hosting a show and you're talking to people, it's different every night. And I mean, some nights it's terrible and it's brutal, and you'll speak to someone and they work in IT and they don't do anything, and you're like, oh, this is a bit of a comedy cul-de-sac. And you do rely on the audience giving you something good to play with. But when it's good and you get a lot of different people in the audience that start to come together and intertwine into stories, there's nothing better.
And it's funny you say that, like that you get sick of saying the same stuff. Does your set kind of need to be similar all the time just to get picked up, or is that just a thing?
I mean, you need to. I mean, any comic worth their salt will kind of constantly have it changing. Maybe every 6 months you're introducing a couple of new bits or material. But you also, and I think that's the mistake a lot of people make starting off, is you're trying out maybe too much new stuff. But in terms of getting booked, it's like maybe any other job. It's like, okay, you're getting booked for a 5-minute trial spot. Can you do 5 minutes of really good material? And then you kind of have to show that you've got this great set, because people say, oh, he's got a good set. But then if you turned up and did something and it was terrible, so then it's the same with your 10 minutes, 15, 20. So you're kind of getting booked on what people think of. And only once you've got a really good set, you should start then maybe tinkering or starting to build up a new 20 minutes. And so, it's kind of bizarre, but you do get sick of yourself sometimes saying it. And it's easy to forget that a lot of people that go to comedy clubs, sometimes it's majority of the time it's their first time at a club, and maybe their only time that they've gone that year or at all. It's usually like a night out or something that's been organised by one person of a group, or a date. So the turnover of people coming, it's so different that you kind of want to make sure you're using your best stuff a lot of the time.
And what about hecklers? Have you had your share of them?
Yeah, do you know, I think we're quite lucky though, this generation, that I think the stories of hecklers and difficult audiences, and even as Glasgow having this kind of famous reputation, thankfully that's a bit old school now. I don't think we get it in the same way as people think.
Yeah.
But if anything, it's more just annoying now. It's usually just drunk people that'll just be like, like a noise, and you can't really do much with. But the worst heckle we've had was, I say we because I was in a sketch group for a long time as well, and we did a terrible gig in a snooker club in Kirkcaldy. So
you've been asking for it there.
Oh, I mean, didn't stand a chance really. And it was a pretty small audience as it was, and the audience weren't enjoying this quite surreal sketch group already. And about halfway through, we finished a sketch, and one of the old guys sat there just went. So that was it. We were like, Didn't even have to verbalise it. Just did a wee whistle bomb sound, and we were like, "Oh, we've still got about 15 minutes to go." Like it wasn't even near the end. So it was pretty brutal.
And you supported Kevin Bridges as well in 2012, is that right?
No, I was very grateful. I mean, it's mad to think that's how great he is. I mean, when I was starting out, I was a wee bit older than some people start out when they're very young, but I think I was 22, 23, and he was younger than me, but he was already headlining clubs and was already kind of going places people knew. But he was still on the circuit. It was kind of just before he really blew up, so we'd become kind of good pals. We were playing five-a-sides and I was driving him around to gigs, so very grateful that kind of early tour, he had myself and another comic. We were all just good pals. Damon Clark, an Australian comic, that kind of split up the different tour dates.
Yeah.
And what an incredible experience. I hadn't been going too long, but got to play these incredible venues and get to have a wee taste of what that kind of life's like for him. And he's been very kind to the people like myself and anyone that was kind of pals or had gigged with him. And been on a few trips with him that's just I wouldn't have done otherwise. We've been over to Barcelona games and stuff where he's introduced me to folk that have set him up for ticket. Just little things like that where you think that's very good of him.
Yeah, that's amazing to have. And I take it the show's varied in size in terms of like big or small. Did you ever do the Hydro with him, or
well, the Hydro, I'm trying to think if had that opened. It probably had, but I don't think. I think at the time he was maybe doing the SECC that tour. Was he? But the biggest show we did, I remember, was the Caird Hall in Dundee. So that was 4,000 people, and it just seemed kind of bizarre to me. I think I was in Dundee about 3 months later, just myself, just doing the kind of there was a comedy club, there still is, on the circuit up there. That's just in like a cafe. It holds like 50 people.
Yeah.
So it was quite funny. I was thinking, I was just playing to 4,000 people, but now you're just back on the grind and doing the circuit.
Yeah, it must be mental to get a taste of that as well. It must be like a golden ticket to get that gig,
Aye, it's great. Anyone that does it, it's a great experience. I mean, he has a very particular audience as well, so you kind of have to be I think there's different comics you can support, and I've supported a few different ones, but his audience in particular is maybe the most, or can be the most kind of raucous, let's say. But they're really up for it. So
yeah, and you've done the Fringe numerous times as well.
Yeah, so as myself, I've done a few different solo show runs, and with that sketch group, bizarrely, I've done it now with Judy Murray in the guise of this alter ego, and I'll be going back for my first time in terms of with a kind of new solo show. This August, talking about actually going to America and playing basketball. So
bringing it full circle.
Yeah.
That's incredible. You mentioned Judy Murray there. We're kind of doing a wee timeline. I don't know if you've noticed. We're kind of going through. But you got fame through the BBC Shorts and Scot Squad, which again was mostly improvised, or they gave you a kind of idea and you just kind of improv. That must have been a great gig as well.
Yeah, Scot Squad was great for stand-ups and kind of comedy performers. It was like a dream job because I mean I love acting and was I love getting acting jobs, but an acting job where you also just got to improvise comedy. I mean, you get a kind of a breakdown, usually a page at most of the scene or what's happening, but no dialogue really, and then you just get to go for it. Yeah. And most acting jobs are pretty sterile in terms of you stand there and say this line and then we'll come and get it another way and say that line again. And Scot Squad was just very unique. It was, try it this way and then, right, we've got that, say what you want differently this time and we'll maybe try filming it a different way. And so it was very free. I don't think we'll get a chance to do a show like that again. So the comics that were involved in that show, because there was quite a few from the kind of comedy circuit, loved it.
Yeah. And it's quite unique as well because you get to be a copper, so you get to take the piss out of the police.
It was
which
great.
Is any comic's dream, I can imagine.
Aye, any authoritarian figures, it's great if you get to make fun of them. But it's also great. I mean, I just looked forward to putting it on. It sounds daft, but for some reason you really do feel like a copper. Like you feel like I'm a person of importance. Putting on that for, it's easy to see where they can get a bit of a power trip. The police, you feel pretty good in it. And it just like you could send a photo to my mum and be like, "Look, I've got a real job."
But I'm so proud of you. I knew that stand-up thing wasn't for you. Nice noble job, the policeman. And I also found out that you were an ordained minister as well.
That's right,
which
yeah.
It's fascinating.
I know, it was, and again, I was an ordained minister in America. I went back over there to my kind of best pal when I'd lived in the States from that trip. He was getting married, and he said, "I want you to marry us." I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "You can get ordained over here, no problem." The Universal Life Church, it's called. You can sign up online. And so I can legally marry people over in America.
Wow.
And I have done weddings over here, but it's, Scotland, the church and the government are too involved. So it's not, I can perform ceremonies here, but people still have to get married at a registry office or something before or after.
Yeah.
But it was great. I mean, getting to marry people in America was, again, just a very cheesy, beautiful thing where I got to do the whole, "But the power vested in me by the state of Oregon, I now pronounce you." And it felt very hilarious, like something out of a movie. But it's quite funny. You sign up online and you get to choose, like, you can do a wee tick box. Do you want like a dog collar or a robe? Or you can pick a wee bit of merchandise. I was like, I want a robe, man. This is great.
You'll need to go over to Vegas and do the whole Elvis thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be hilarious.
So it's weird, but I've done a couple of like my mates, like naming days, ceremonies for kids and stuff like that. And it's good.
That's class, man. And you do kind of sportsman's dinners and stuff like that as well, like kind of hosting, which has put me in a nervous position because you're a host and I'm like, I'm a host. And I'm like, how's my hosting skills been?
No, I am a very natural host. It's the kind of thing when you're starting out again, it seems like it would fill you with dread and nervousness. And it still does, because some of the earlier ones I got asked to do or to speak at, like sportsman's dinners, they usually always had football players or like ex-referees as well. And the audience really just want to hear all these funny football stories and like stories from the locker room and referee. And so I think the very first one I did, Jim Robotham, the ex-referee, was doing it. And I had this kind of, I don't know, like this bare minimum 20 minutes of comedy. Some of it was kind of football related, but a lot of it was still just kind of a bit surrealist and, and kind of, I remember thinking, I've not done really that well here. And then Jim's getting up and he's got like a flag and a whistle and like props from football, and he's talking about giving dodgy calls in people's favour and Stephen Presley, and they were loving it, and I was like, oh, this is a different world.
Yeah.
So it took a while to realise you need to have kind of different types of material, and that comes with experience. We would see there was a reason why, and still you see people like Fred McCauley and Des Clark. These guys are consummate professionals that have been going for long, and they host a lot of events. And you just need to know you've got a certain type of repertoire for those types of occasions.
Yeah, and plus because you're a football fan as well, it gives you a chance to tailor your set to football.
Yeah, going forward then, I did start to enjoy it because I had more and more material, and I had more stories from football, and I got to do the SFA's Christmas party a couple of times, which is surreal. And I did this year actually, at the start of the year, I was very lucky. I did the Dennis Law Legacy Trust dinner. Oh, wow. And I honestly still a bit stunned by this. I was sat at a table with Dennis Law, his family, and then I had Joe Jordan next to me and his wife, and they had a few of the Gothenburg greats there. So Willie Miller was there, and Jim Layton, and Stuart Kennedy, and I was just like, what am I doing here? Like proper imposter syndrome. They were going up to do a wee Q&A about football, and then I'm going up to do, so. But what a great way to be able to meet people, even just to say, get a wee photo. I'm just fanboying over them, really.
That's mad. I'm a massive Manchester United fan.
Yeah, me too. Well, it was a dream, really, because Aberdeen, Man United, and I'm like, this is a dream occasion for me.
Yeah, I know. There's a guy called Gordon Smart. I don't know if you know who he is. He's always in at the football and that, but he goes to United and he's right behind Sir Alex Ferguson. I'm like he could touch Fergie. It's just incredible. But actually, I reached out to him as well, and he was giving me some good pointers, which was great. So thank you, Gordon. If you're listening, you're probably not. But you then had a project called The Farm, which you were a co-writer on as well.
Yeah, so I came up with an idea for a sitcom on a farm. Essentially, there's a real life farmer, Jim Smith, who had kind of just started into comedy. I'd seen him at a couple of gigs just starting out. I think I actually hosted his first ever Red Raw, which is the name of the newcomer night at the stand. And we'd kind of got talking, and both had been these kind of rural guys, and so I'd already had a bit of an affinity. But we also had him on as a guest for Scot Squad, where he played a farmer.
I think I saw that, yeah.
And it was basically during one of those scenes. I was always thinking of different locations for sitcoms, and had been doing writing on different shows, and was always trying to think of a unique idea. And it kind of struck me as odd that actually I was like, there's not been a sitcom on a farm, and certainly not for a long time. So I approached Jim not too long afterwards to say, I'm thinking about doing a sitcom on a farm. Do you want to try writing it? Because you'd wanted to be as authentic as possible.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was a real farmer, but also comedy and was into writing. So we set about writing that. But what a long journey. If people hear about, stuck in development hell and how long things can take.
Yeah.
We did our first read through of a script in 2015.
Wow.
For that. And that was at the Stand Comedy Club. We actually had Mark Cox in to read one of the parts from Still Game, and Jim himself at that time hadn't done any of his kind of farm diaries, and hadn't even really done a lot of acting or performance, so he was just playing he wasn't even playing himself that he would go on to play, but such was the long development process that by the time we actually came to filming even the wee iPlayer shorts and stuff, he was much more comfortable being in front of camera.
That's amazing.
So yeah, I think it took about 7 years before we had actually filmed stuff we did 2 iPlayer series, and about 8-9 years before we actually had a first TV 30-minute one, and then the second one was just last year. So it can take a long time, it's a funny game.
It's going to be frustrating, but the project could change over that time. And did it change at all?
Yeah, hugely. I mean, at first we started off, there was going to be kind of studio elements. It was going to be a bit more almost a bit more old-fashioned in a sense of filming certain scenes indoors and having a bit of a live audience. And just the way the TV landscape had changed and mockumentaries becoming bigger and bigger, we quickly realised that this should be more of a mockumentary and seeing how the farm works. And then even between our iPlayer series and our 2 filmed ones, we had a change of cast. We had one of the core characters was a mother for Jim.
Right.
But in the second one, just with changes of producer and director, we didn't have the mother character, we had a sister. So it's mad to think. And I think perhaps, the commissioner was maybe not leaning too heavily on the fact, but he wanted to get it so right and kept suggesting different things. And his reference point was always This Country, which obviously was wildly successful and a similar type of rural show, but that had 3 pilots before it even went to series.
Really?
So a lot of shows go through this bizarre procedure of there's so many producers and exec producers and commissioners, and everyone wants to have their say and so many changes, and instead of a dog, what about a cat? Just all right, okay, guys.
There's just too many cooks in the kitchen, as they say.
It's mad.
Do you enjoy the writing process? Is that something that you've always been keen to do?
Yeah, I do. I love coming up with new ideas. The script writing itself can be quite tricky, but I do enjoy the writing aspect. And again, that's still the dream going forward, is to keep trying to have different kind of writer performing roles, hopefully.
I know, that's amazing. It's kind of like you're quite known for playing quite silly characters, aren't you? From the Scot Squad, it's quite silly. The Farm's quite silly, and then you've got Duncan from the other Murray brother, which was hugely successful.
It's mad.
That you were working with Judy Murray, and you took that on the road as well. You did a little kind of tour with that, didn't you?
Yeah, bizarrely, again, that was supposed to just be a one-off sketch. And I don't think anyone involved with that would have realised how big it might have gone and how many people would have believed it was real as well, which kind of helped it. And so, it kind of grew arms and legs and up to the point where we did a kind of a series of kind of filmed stuff for BBC Online, but then we thought maybe we could try doing a live show, thinking it might a wee cult audience might come along, but the Fringe show kind of sold out in a few hours, so we added another one that sold out. So then we said, oh, maybe we should do more, you know. And so we did the Glasgow Comedy Festival this year. We did the Kings, which just seemed bonkers considering we did this one kind of 90-second sketch. And now we're off to Perth and Aberdeen, and we're going back to the Fringe for a couple of dates.
That's insane.
It's so weird. Very surreal.
And especially working with somebody like Judy, like she's not known for doing anything like that, and she seemed to enjoy it. Yeah,
and again, if you're going back to that whole, when you're starting out and you're asking me about trying to get that 5 minutes, at no point starting out in your comedy career would you have thought you'd be doing a double act with Judy Murray. It just doesn't make sense. But the thing I love the most about it is, and I probably had those preconceptions as well, and was very nervous about her turning up to film the first thing, is people think of her as quite a kind of hard person, you know, and you do only see wee clips of her on Andy Murray things and being like, oh, hard, and this reputation as a pushy mum, but the fact that actually she kind of knows that reputation and just plays up to it.
Oh wow!
And she's so much more just fun and laid back, and they love comedy, and she comes up with ideas and throws in her own lines, and like her comedy timing is better than a lot of comics I know. I mean, she doesn't need to be as funny as she is. I mean, I don't know how that's happened, but it's very surreal. She's very good.
And you get people coming up to you and being like, Duncan, or believing that you are a Murray brother?
Yeah, I mean, not even Duncan, actually. Bizarrely, we filmed a lot of the sketches up at Cromlix, which is the hotel that Andy took on, the family run it. But someone was going past and thought I was Jamie. You know, they were really excited to see Judy. They were, oh, Judy, how you doing? Oh, Jamie, oh, how are you? And I just thought, well, I'll just play up to this. And I was like, yeah, great, you know, how you doing? So I think the saddest thing is that when people who really seem to have taken to Duncan as this poor soul that he is, when they find out still that he isn't real, it's heartbreaking. Like, you feel kind of bad that you've tricked people.
But that's kudos to how your performance. You know what I mean? You've fooled everybody. You know. And fire alarm.
That's it. That's all the time we have left.
No, we're not getting evacuated. Yeah. And you got. I take it you got to meet Andy and Jamie.
I've met Jamie and not Andy. Andy, they live down south anyway, but they're just, I mean, he's so busy and a huge team around him. He's been kind enough to, I mean, they've certainly engaged with the whole thing, which is nice because it means I know they don't hate it. So they both filmed wee videos that we use within the live show as well, which is good.
Yeah.
But the first time I met Jamie, and I was kind of horrified about this, was at a live Q&A that Judy, Jamie and Leon Smith, who the Davis Cup captain, was doing at a David Lloyd Centre. And Judy had said to me, oh, why don't you come along as Duncan and like you can crash the event and then like join in with the Q&A just to kind of break it up. It'll be quite good to have some comedy. And so I just assumed that she'd told them this was happening, but she hadn't. Oh, no. So the first time I met him, I was just like barging in on this Q&A that he was having, this quite official thing. And I thought he could have easily been pretty annoyed, you know, but he was just like, oh, hi Duncan, and like really great, played along with it. Their Gran was in the audience, and I was like going over to her like, Gran, how's it going? She was like, oh, Duncan, and even she was in on the act. So it was great afterwards to be like, oh, thanks for playing along. He was like, no bother. And he was telling me how funny it was that his wife's kind of family were like, who's this other brother? You know, his wife's Colombian, so his family back there were just like, this so could confused. Be real. Like, what's going on?
That's honestly like so funny, and it's great TV, you know, and it's no surprise that people are liking it and the show. And I take it that you doing the Fringe this year with that and doing the Fringe on your own?
Yeah, so yeah, we actually just yesterday we announced our 2 Fringe dates. So they just went on sale, and then I'm doing a 10-day run as myself with this court jester show. So that'll be quite niche, but if you like 90s references in basketball, it'll be a good show.
Yeah. And where can the people find you online for if they want to give you a follow, or if you've got anything in the pipeline coming up? Here's your time to plug anything.
Listen, follow me home. I'm on so on Twitter I'm Chris_Forbes, although I also say that I don't even have that many followers. I'm not great at social media, and I kind of hate Duncan Murray now because he's more popular than me. But he's on Twitter at Duncan, __Murray. He's got like 30,000 followers. I've only got a couple of thousand. I'm always like, how did he get so successful in a couple of years?
Yeah.
I've been slogging away. But so there's details of our shows on there. I'm on Instagram, Facebook as well, Chris Forbes Comedy. So yeah, all the details of shows, I'm sure they're up there.
Brilliant. And do you have to post as Duncan? Like, is that you're the behind the social media, or you got a team doing that?
Yeah, I like to think he's his own entity, and I like to try and distance myself. But yeah, I run his account, so, and I just chip in every so often. I'll comment on something that Andy's done or that Mum's done, you know, so but yeah, if anything, it's more fun. It's actually more fun tweeting as a character, because you kind of have more of a reason to say something.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of comics, social media is a bit of an evil a necessary evil now, and a lot of it is kind of you're having to promote stuff, and you kind of get a bit sick of being like, oh, this is where the gigs are, and come and see this. Whereas Duncan's just saying stupid stuff all the time. It's more fun.
Yeah, I can imagine that could be quite appealing. Also, the only last thing that I did research on you, it said that your nickname was Funtime Forbes. Is that true?
Yeah, it's it kind of haunts me a wee bit. No, it doesn't. I really like that. I kind of got that nickname during uni. Bizarrely, it was Frank Skinner had a show on telly at the time, and the wee theme tune was Fun Time Frankie, and my mates started doing it for Fun Time Forbesy, and like our house, me and my brother were quite known for having a lot of empties and having parties.
Brilliant.
So people would be like, "Oh, we're going out to Fun Times," and my mum's car that we would drive was this huge Ford Scorpio estate family wagon, so everyone would call it the fun bus. So I had all these weird things, but I probably did more partying than studying at uni during those getting a G for chemistry years. So the fun time name was hard earned.
You earned it. I mean, that's what studying's for, isn't it?
Yeah,
finding yourself. But thank you very much for coming on. It's
Thanks
been
for having me.
An honour to have you, and I know how busy you are, so thank you for giving me the time.
Not at all.
I really appreciate it. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next Tuesday.